One day, a young girl came to our apartment, and when she walked in, my father said, "Shloyme, this is your sister." Now, let me tell you a little bit about this story because it's an important part of my life. It turns out that when my father left the shtetl and went to Warsaw, he was sort of taken in by one of the family friends who lived in Warsaw from the same shtetl. And that's where he learned his tailoring, because that man was a tailor, and he simply took under his wing my father when he was young, when he became an apprentice, etc. So he lived with that family. That family, the name was Garbiage, and the family were from the same town as Wochin. When my father was married and a young man, the person that his so-called adopted father was older than him. He was an active in Communist Party, and he was arrested many times. It became a very symbiotic relationship between my father, my mother, and that family, and they sort of became family of each other, because when the older man was arrested, my father was the head of the family, etc. In that family, there were two young girls, of course older than I am, and it was a family of tailor. When the war broke out, we left, and apparently what happened, and what I'm telling you is what we know later on what happened. That family was in one of the actions, of course, taken in from Warsaw, and they were sent to Treblinka. On the way, they knew where they were going, and they literally pushed one of the girls, the younger girl, Bronka, out of the train, out of the wagon, and she was wounded, but she survived. It's a long story about how she survived. And she met up with another girl from the same town, and the two of these girls were walking through the woods in Poland. For a time they were in the Jewish partisans, etc. They somehow managed to cross the front line between the Germans and the Soviets, and they ended up in Soviet Union during the war. And I cannot tell you whether they were there in 43 or 44. I don't remember. In any event, Bronka was somehow knew or believed that we survived. And she spent over a year searching for us. And she was describing a family of Jakub, my father, Sarah, and a child. And somehow somebody knew, etc., and they directed they directed her to us, and eventually she showed up one day at my apartment, where we lived, rather in the house in Kherson. And of course, she was the only survivor, and she became my sister. And she, to this day, is my sister. She lives in Israel, and my parents became her parents and became grandparents to her children, who also live in Israel. And she's part of my family.